I got one dog.
Do we have any speakers?
I didn't see one.
Oh, Kelly. This is your book.
All right, we'll go ahead and call to order the regular scheduled Winnebago County Board meeting for June 27th. The clerk will do the roll.
Any agenda updates?
None that I see on here.
Okay. Mr. Webster.
Here.
Mr. Westcott.
Present.
Mr. Arena.
Here.
Mr. Billich.
Here.
Mr. Boomer.
Here.
Mr. Booker.
Present.
Mr. Butita.
Here.
Mrs. Crosby.
Here.
Mr. Fellers.
Here.
Mr. Fiducia.
Here.
Mr. Girl.
Present.
Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Hoffman.
Present.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. McDonald.
Present.
Mr. Neighbors.
Here.
Mrs. Red. Mr. Salgado.
Present.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Tassoni.
Present.
18 present, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a quorum. Tonight's invocation, Pledge of Allegiance, will be Board Member Steve Schultz.
Dear God, we love you, and we are grateful that you've given us life, and you've given us purpose, and you've given us hope. And we are thankful that we have the privilege to serve this community, but we recognize, and especially I recognize, our great need for help from you. Thank you that you've told us that if anyone lacks wisdom, that you will provide it liberally, generously, without finding fault. And so we're asking for your wisdom. We trust you. We're grateful for your goodness to us, for giving us life and hope. Thank you for all those that serve in our county, for the employees that work day to day, that give their best to do a good job for our constituents. Thank you for those that put themselves in harm's way on our behalf for our community's sake. Thank you for those nationally who seek to protect our interests. I pray that you'll give wisdom not only to us, but those other leaders that provide guidance for our country, because it is sorely needed. And we thank you in advance for what you're going to do. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have one presentation tonight, and it is Ms. Grimmett. She's the Executive Director from Alignment Rockford. If she could come up. She is here. She is not here. All right, so that'll shorten this up even more. Anyone from the public wish to speak? Signed up? No one signed up. Any board member correspondence? Mr. Butita.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the opportunity this afternoon to be with Brett Fraser and some of his staff at Animal Services, and had a brief tour of their facility and the new kennels that were installed. And I can attest to the fact that the workplace safety has been improved there as a result of the expenditure of funds for the new kennel. So I think things look good there. The other thing I learned there today, there is a Winnebago County Animal Services Auxiliary. They're always looking for volunteers. You need to be 18 years old and willing to commit a minimum of 4 hours a month. So anybody of interest or an animal lover, they're always looking for help.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Butita. Anyone else? Mr. Westcott?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be stepping down tonight from the Economic Development Committee chairmanship, and I'm going to encourage all my fellow board members to replace me with Mr. Jazz Billich, if you would please to do that. It's an honor working with him, and I'm looking forward to getting this done this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott. Any other board members? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Announcements, communications. Clerk Gummel.
Mr. Chairman, the items listed below were received as correspondence.
Thank you, and they will be placed on file. Next, we'll go ahead and move for the consent agenda. Make a motion. Approve that. Second by Mr. Fellers. Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Fellers.
Mr. Fellers.
And Mr. Hoffman. All right. Next, we'll have the county administrator's report. Ms. Pascal. All in favor? I'm sorry. Aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Consent agenda passes. Next, the county administrator's report. Ms. Pascal.
I just wanted to provide some information. There was an editorial in the Rockford Register-Star regarding our plan for roads. I just wanted to clarify some items in case you read that article. The city is allowed to assess a 1% sales tax for roads. That's allowed under the municipal code. There are some collar counties that are allowed to assess a 1% RTA tax for roads as well. Winnebago County, however, is not one of those counties that's allowed to do that. So there is no avenue for us to assess a sales tax for roads. And then also, I believe McHenry County and some of those other collar counties are able to assess a 4-cent gas tax. We also are not allowed to assess that type of tax. So we're pretty limited in the additional taxes we can assess in order to fund roads. As far as the economic development policy, we've discussed this twice in committee now. We'll have a meeting on Monday, July 1st to hopefully approve that economic development policy that we've discussed and refined, and hopefully it'll pass at the board on July 11th. I wanted to introduce our new administrator at River Bluff. She's here with us tonight, Patricia McDermott. Patricia, would you want to stand? Patricia and her Director of Nursing and Assistant Director of Nursing, and Carol Whitney, that's our HR representative now out at River Bluff, had developed a really good team. I'm really pleased with the energy and the teamwork that they've generated. We've increased the census. It's held steady at around 180. So I feel like our financial plan is looking a little more solid out at River Bluff, and we're really pleased with what the future may hold. I also wanted to mention that we will be presenting our first draft of the budget for the general and public safety sales tax funds on July 9th. I'm very hopeful that we'll also have our help on information related to our property tax levy. In the past, you probably remember Tom Walsh presenting on what assessed valuation we have increased due to new construction, as well as what the CPI would allow as far as an increased tax levy.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, County Board. I'm going to make this as brief as possible tonight. I appreciate being invited here to talk to in regards to the 2019 tax levy and the rate scenarios. As we all know, the tax rate is derived from the tax levy divided by the tax base. So I'm going to look at each portion of this equation. We're going to kind of break it down briefly and figure out where each portion is calculated from. Then we'll look at some levy scenarios, how it affects property tax, the individual property taxpayer, and finally just look at some tax rate comparisons amongst taxing districts. So first off, when we're looking at the equalized assessed value of Winnebago County, so from 2009 to 2015, Winnebago County lost $1.2 billion in equalized assessed value. That's over a quarter of the total equalized assessed value. In the past 3 years, we've managed to claw back about 6% of it. And the projection going forward for at least 2019 remains positive. We are projecting an increase in equalized assessed value on existing property of 5.03%. And that is derived from sales ratio studies done by the Illinois Department of Revenue in 2016, 2017, and then our own sales ratio study that we did internally in 2018. So that 5.03%, that value is that's the projected increase in equalized assessed value countywide. So in some instances, that'll be applied at the township level by the township assessors. And in other instances, it'll be applied at the supervisor of assessments office level in the form of an equalization factor or a multiplier. Continuing with the 2019 projections, we're projecting a border review decrease in that value by just around 1/4%. So historically, the border review has reduced the equalized assessed value from anywhere from 1/10%, such as 2018, all the way up to 1.39% in 2011. So we're predicting a 1/4% reduction by the border review, which results in a final 2019 projected EAV on existing property of $4,020,404,656. That's a number to keep in mind here for the next two slides going forward. So in trying to project new construction, at this point in the assessment year is a bit of a crapshoot. I looked at a multitude of variables and found that the prior year instant prorated assessment for market value has a very strong predictive indicator of the following year, or this year in this case. This is new construction of value added. And plugging both of those variables into a linear regression model, it looks like for 2019 we're projecting a new construction increased value of $20 million. As an aside, I feel like that's an extremely conservative number. Looking at all the variables, all the trends, I think that's an extremely conservative number. However, when using these figures in a levy projection scenario, I feel like it's best to err on the side of caution. So if we look at this next slide here, that $4,020,000,000 value, that was the value that's going to be used in conjunction with the property tax extension limitation law in setting the cap for the district of Winnebago County. However, when you add that $20 million in, that puts a final rate setting EAV of $4,040,404,656. So in looking and adding that to the 2019, adding that to the chart that we saw a little bit ago, we're getting close to making up halfway of that total equalized assessed value where we were at in 2009. The second part of that equation is the aggregate extension base. And if you look at this slide, over the past 9 years, well, especially over the past 4 years or so, Winnebago County Extension has remained fairly stagnant, right around $39 million. So in determining the aggregate extension base as mandated by PTEL, what happens here is we take the past 3 years of the aggregate extension base, and whatever year is highest, we take that year minus the abatements. In our case, 2017 had the highest base, so minus the 2018 abatements, that sets that level at $39,041,884. We then add either 5% or the consumer price index, and whichever is lower. As it has been for a while, and it holds true this year, the CPI, as determined from the Illinois Department of Revenue, their number is 1.9%. So that is what is going to be used in regards to setting the extension base and that limiting rate for the tax extension. So that gives a 2019 aggregate extension of $39 million with the PTEL side of this. So as I mentioned, that sets a limiting rate for 2019, a projected limiting rate of 0.9895%. So using that information, we get into some levy scenarios. So that first column is the scenario if we do hit that $4 billion, 40 million mark of the rate setting EAV and there is no levy increase. That gives a 2019 county tax rate, the county's portion, at 0.9622%. Again, the limiting rate is 0.9895%. Just for reference, the 2018 county's rate was 1.0173. So that number is drastically lower than that, as well as the limiting rate, excuse me. If the levy was increased to include the same percent of that $20 million new construction portion, that would change that rate to 0.9710%. This next slide, or this next scenario, is if the levy was increased to hit that CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, of 1.9%. And if that was the case, the county tax rate would be 0.9846%, which is still well below the 2018 rate, as well as that limiting rate of 0.9895%. The third scenario is if the levy was increased to include both. If you access the $20 million in new construction, as well as include that 1.9% CPI, that would put the rate at 0.9894%, just shy of the limiting rate, but still well below the 2018 rate. And in this slide, this scenario, and this is kind of one of the main takeaways from this whole presentation, is if you were to access that $20 million of new construction and you raise that percent, that would be that 0.9710 that we touched upon. That would equal a levy freeze if there was no new construction available to take. If that 20 million just did not occur, it would be the exact same as a levy freeze with no new construction. So how all this plays into an individual's property tax bill, I know there's a lot of numbers here. I'm not going to go through this line by line. Everybody has a copy of the PowerPoint. If anybody has any questions, if they look at this later and have any questions, I encourage everyone to either call or shoot me an email, and I'd be more than happy to try and clarify. Real quick, the first column is the 2018 tax year. Moving over to that second column, that's the 2019 with the projected EAV increases with no levy increase. So there would be an individual with a market value of $100,000 with no assessed value increase. And as an aside, that 5.03% is the non-farm weighted county level that's going to be reached countywide. It doesn't mean that obviously every house is going to see a 5.03 increase. That depends on equalization that's done within the township. Some houses or some homes, some properties might see an increase of a little more than that if they were drastically underassessed. Some might see a reduction even, or no increase. So going all the way over to that third column, which is the taking into consideration the Consumer Price Index and the $20 million in new construction into the levy, that would lower an individual whose assessed value was $33,333, $7.63. So on the other end of the spectrum, if you did have a home or a property that did get hit with the 5.03 increase in assessed value, this slide is kind of reflecting what their tax bill might look like. Again, first column is the 2018 tax year. The second is the 2019 with no levy increase. So even if they got hit with a 5.03 assessed value increase, they're going to see $1.07 change to the county as far as their 2019 tax bill goes. Going all the way over again to the right, if the levy was increased to include both the consumer price index and that 20 million of new construction, that would raise their tax portion of the county $8.96. So finally, just a couple of comparisons of, again, first off, here's the Winnebago County tax rate from 2009 onward. As you can tell, it kind of is the inverse of that EAV slide that we showed earlier, where 2015 in this one is the high water mark, and it is coming down. And as we just saw, it's projected to go even lower in 2019. Here's the taxing districts all within tax code 001. They kind of have a good cross-section of some of the larger taxing districts in the area. Obviously, the Rockford Public School District 205 is a large portion of that. And you'll note Winnebago County is the 4th one on the list, just behind Rockford Park District, and about half a point higher than the Rock Valley Community College. And then finally tonight, here's just a different take or a different look at that last slide. This is the percentage of the of that 14.2 rate in tax code 001. As you can see, Winnebago County is at 7%. Rockford School District is at 52%, which is fairly standard throughout the state and the nation as far as school districts go. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or any clarification. Mr. Webster? I'm sorry, do I?
No worries. Mr. Webster?
Thank you, Tom. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this whole thing that everyone needs to realize is that very last page, that pie chart you got there, okay? Think about that. The Rockford Park District garners more tax money than the county of Winnebago. Now, we got some nice parks. Yes, they do a good job of keeping them up on that. But what sense is this when their sole focus is parks? With that kind of money, their sole focus is parks. With a little bit less than that, we have so many services that we have to provide. We have so many more employees. We have so many more departments, so many more vehicles and equipment. It's amazing that we can get by with that small amount of money, with all the services and the equipment and the manpower that we have and our payroll that we have. Think about that. How did we get things so upside down that a county of this size receives less money than a park district? You know, think about that. Let that sink in. It's crazy. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Any other questions for Mr. Hodges? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Yep. I'm sorry, Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick point of clarification. Ms. Pascal, you said that the 1% for roads was a state statute. I believe for Rockford, I believe that's voter referendum. The 1% is a voter referendum.
Based on the municipal code allowing it.
Right, but I mean, this county could as well have a voter referendum, could they not?
No. I consulted with the state's attorney. It's not, there's no avenue for having a referendum for a 1% tax for roads.
Could it be done for infrastructure, just general public, the same way we've done with the 1% public safety?
Well, that couldn't be used for roads, though.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Mr. Webster?
Yeah, thank you. I really wasn't going to say anything, but I want to bring this up too. Administrator brought this up about the article in the newspaper. And so I just want to respond to this as well. The picture that was in the newspaper, and it was a smeared picture there, an action picture of a patching job that was done on one of our county roads. I don't know if you all saw that or not, but that was a horrible picture, a terrible representation of the work that our county highway department does. That was called blade patching. That's an art. Not many counties can do that. It takes a very experienced operator running a motor grader to do blade patching. It's very economical to do it that way. You don't have to tear up a whole road. You go in there with some hot asphalt, and it takes, believe me, it takes some experience to do this. We've had, if I'm not mistaken, we've had engineers come from other counties to see how we do that. They're amazed that you can do it like that. We've been doing it in our county like that for, I don't know, Steve Haas has done it for over 20 years. He's gone now, but at any rate, when the comments we're making do with what we have, that's one of the ways that we do. And I'm proud of our county highway department with such a small staff to be able to do that. Secondly, in that article, they point out there, what was pointed out there was about getting the $10 million here recently, a bump on that. And in the past, myself and Tassoni and Bert, yourself and Boomer, we've talked about using economic development money, post fee money, for something other than economic development money. In other words, going to our highway needs. Well, I've been beat down and berated for that before, but I don't care. I'm going to keep bringing that up time and time again, because every time we come in with these host fees, that's money that could be used to help our highway along. And so what we have here in our total commitment here, projected host fee commitments, was $33,604,109. If we'd have used that money to take care of our own needs first, before we start doling it out to every other entity around, if we'd have taken care of our own needs first, with that money, our roads wouldn't be in the shape they are now. If we'd used a third of that, $10 million, our roads wouldn't be in the shape they are now. And so that's not the total cure for everything with our roads, that's for sure. But I tell you what, 33 million bucks would be one hell of a start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Any other questions for the administrator? None? We'll move on to standing committees. Chairman Salgado, Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 3 items for tonight. The first one is an ordinance establishing civil fees, criminal traffic assessments to be charged by the clerk of circuit. It's to be laid over, but I'd like to suspend the rules. And
motion is to suspend the rules. Second. Second by Mr. Westcott, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Boomer. The rules have been suspended. Mr. Salgado.
Probably make the vote on it, right?
Motion to approve. We have a second by Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Boomer. It has been seconded. Any discussion on the ordinance?
Mr. Chairman, point of order. We didn't vote on the suspension.
We did not. Thank you. Thank you.
I usually do that. That's how I identify it.
Right. I was trying to move this by quick. Not that quick, though. Absolutely. So we have a motion to suspend the rules. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The rules have been suspended. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I'd like to move to approve an ordinance establishing civil fees and criminal traffic assessments to be charged by the clerk of the circuit court.
And the motion has been made. Is there a second? Mr. Boomer, Mr. Hoffman, and the motion is in front of us. Any discussion on this? Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Salgado or Mr. Lawson's in the room. Could you just give myself the 30-second, rundown on what it entails?
Yes, Mr. Lawson, if you want to come up, but real briefly, there's been some changes, and we've taken to the max what the state statute allows us to do. So there's certain areas that it has gone up and declined on some of the filing fees, but Mr. Lawson can speak a little bit more to it.
So,
I can talk loud. There's a mute button on it, the left button. Go ahead and press that. Is it on?
Yep.
There we go. So this started with Public Act 100-987. It's been like 2 years in progress, started with Supreme Court committees that I was on along with other clerks around the state. And it basically is a change in the way we do business today with not only in civil court, but in criminal and traffic. So today what we know is fines and costs. Now we call assessments, conditional assessments, and fines. The most major parts of not going through the entire thing is it started a schedule system. And the point of the schedule system was so that if Tom Lawson, knock on wood, driving home tonight receives a speeding ticket, that speeding ticket would cost me approximately the same whether it was here in Winnebago County or in Boone County. So it set up a schedule system. So that ticket that you would pay $164 for starting July 1st here in Winnebago would also be $164 in Boone County. So it started a schedule system so everything was a little closer to being equal across state where you're at. Same thing within the civil area. The civil schedules were set by Illinois Supreme Court with recommendations from several clerks committees and the administrative office of Illinois courts. For us, the most major thing is there are fee waivers. There is now a criminal fee waiver, which is different. This is the first time there has been a criminal fee waiver. So an individual who could be deemed partially indigent or meet the full poverty level of indigency will receive some type of reduction in the amount that they would have to pay based on what was assessed by the court. So there is a lot of items in here that we haven't seen in the past. In my process of coming up with what you see tonight, it is studying various different organizations that receive funds from what we do, what we collect in our office. It looked at several different budgets and how they operate. It worked also on things that I have seen over my 22 years and needs that we see on a daily basis. So that's how those numbers came up. I fully anticipate there to be several changes coming forward. Senate Bill 1609 is already looking at changing some of what we do today. We as recently as Wednesday got a change in this ordinance that went through finance tonight. So we anticipate there to be changes at the end of the 6-month period, which will end on December 31st. I will be putting together numbers as to what the financial impact was for Winnebago County, at which time I'll probably be back in January to say we need to adjust this ordinances to, so to speak, right the ships that have come from fee waivers and these other things that take place in the court system. Today, a lot of this is what I would call my 22 years of an educated guess, because I can't anticipate how many fee waivers are going to get approved in the court system. What I can tell you is at the end of the 6th month, I'll put back in front of you the best information that I have from our system to make this a lot closer to where it needs to be.
Any other questions, Mr. Tassoni? Anyone else? All right, seeing none. Any other discussion? Ms. Corll.
Thank you. Tom, did you have to hire out to have these new fees put together, or did your office and you do it?
So we have a new release that is actually in the process of going in right now, a new software release. All of the instituting of the fees within the system were done by myself and my accounting department. So we're the ones doing all the programming for the new fees. But we have worked very hard with members of Maryland's office, David Dahl from the State's Attorney's Office, the Chief Judge, Trial Court Administration, to redo forms, to institute new procedures, to really look at what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just the clerk doing all this work. All the members of the court system have really put some time and effort into trying to make this the best it can be.
Excellent. Follow-up, Ms. Corll.
I want to thank you for that. How much money do you think you saved us by doing it through your office? Too many times we go out and have counselors come in and tell us what to do, what not to do, and they're wrong to begin with, and we have paid thousands of dollars. at this time, not only do I want to thank you, Tom, I should have thanked Mr. Hodges, too, for all the work he's put into this without having to hire in outside help to come in and to do it. It talks about, this just lets you know how good Winnebago County is and how good our staff is. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Squirrel. Any other questions for Mr. Lawson on this matter? All right, seeing none, we have ordinance in front of us establishing civil fees and criminal and traffic assessments to be charged by the clerk of the circuit court. Is on the floor. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Ordinance is passed. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item we have is a budget amendment 2019-023 ComEd sirens past due invoices. It's to be laid over, but once again, I'd like to suspend the rules and vote on it tonight so we can get this paid.
Motion to suspend the rules. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Westcott. Mr. Boomer, the rules have been suspended. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Rules have been suspended. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I move to approve budget amendment 2019-023 ComEd sirens past due invoices.
And the motion's been made. Do we have a second? Mr. Boomer, Westcott, Mr. Hoffman. Any discussion on the ComEd siren past due payment? Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. Why were they past due?
So Carla can maybe give a little bit of history, or Ann Johns can provide information, but ultimately the sirens that we currently have, the electricity has not been paid because of the misunderstanding of who's responsible for what, being in different municipalities across the county. So Jan, I don't know if you want to add any information or history on that.
Sure, I can add some history on that. The sirens that are past due are all within the city of Rockford. There's 25 of them. There was a misunderstanding, I think, back when the IGA was written to install the sirens. I think it was assumed by the county that that each district that had a siren or each location would pay the electricity. But what the city of Rockford does not pay it. They send the bills back, and this goes back to like 2009. So I literally have a filing cabinet drawer this big of these bills that come in, and it got to the point where I had to sit down with one of the state's attorney and one of the lawyers from ComEd to negotiate it down to a reasonable amount, just so we could finish it. And this is something I was literally, Roman Gray left me a note about this was a big issue to deal with it. And it's been an ongoing thing, but it's strictly the city. All the rest of the sirens, 3/4 of the sirens are in other locations, and we pay those every month, and we always have. But for some reason, and I don't know, it goes back to something Sally set up, so I'm sorry. It's just been an issue. But it's come to a head now, and I'd like to put it behind us and continuing to pay them on going forward. And the price going forward is roughly $22 a month per siren, and there's 25 sirens.
Thank you, Ms. Johns.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit about that, I believe it was a little bit over $200,000. I want to say the total, and they got it down to 94, I believe, or 82 grand. So this essentially wipes out any past dues and going forward. I do want to make a comment, though. There has been discussion about potentially going electronic through, whether it's alerts through the phone versus using the sirens, because due to the cost and the maintenance, especially with those sirens. Also looking at geofencing potentially on that aspect of it, but ultimately getting rid of the sirens is being talked about. Not saying that that's going to occur, but something that potentially could save money for the county. So just want to bring that up. That was part of the discussion on that.
Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for the record, we need to keep the sirens. I think we need to find alternate methods of maintenance or whatever, but I'm not in favor of getting rid of the sirens. Ms. Johns, are there any other cities or municipalities that kick in for these sirens?
This is unbelievably complicated. What happens is, and I don't know why the city won't do this for us, we, like the town of Winnebago, they have to agree to take over the sirens. an IGA was signed for the building of the sirens, but let's say the ones in Winnebago Township or community, if they agree to take it over, they then can go to ComEd and say, we don't want to pay these. We want these as part of the policy where you bill out all the citizens a percent. We all get a ComEd bill with a percent of fees. So then Winnebago doesn't have to pay them. But the city has never signed that agreement with ComEd to take over responsibility for them. And that's what's been trying to accomplish for the last 12 years. So no, all the other sirens that are truly in a community like like Rockton, they pay them, but there's some that are truly in a county, in the county, in a cornfield somewhere. We pay those, and those there's like over 100 sirens. So there's a lot of them that we do pay. Like I said, and we call them consolidated. We have one big consolidated bills for all of these. It's just all these city sirens that literally a separate bill comes for all 25. So I get 25 bills a month, and they tack on these $5,000 fees, $2,000 deposits. They just keep tacking on money every month. It's just obscene. And if we go for a year by paying our bills on time, after that, we're actually going to get some fees back. But we just have to get this far. But yes, so sometimes they pay them, but most of the ones that are left are actually in the county.
Ms. Red.
Thank you, Chairman. A few days ago, I was in Tennessee, and I got an alarm. It woke me up. There was a storm or a tornado or something coming through. So I think we need to look at something else other than paying all of this money. Maybe we can do it through the cell phones.
Thank you, Ms. Red. Ms. Corll?
Is there any reason, or has anyone looked into using solar power with these fire sirens? You know, as you go down the highways and you go all over, they're even using them for roads now. It's all solar power. Would that be cheaper for us? How would that work? I have no idea, but I sure would like to see us go into something on that order to say how, you know, you're out in the country, you're not next to a telephone, I mean, an electric pole. How do we get that information out and back? And how can we actually use solar to operate those? I'd like to have something like that looked into. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Corll. Any other discussion on this? Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Johns, just so that I understood what you said, some communities are taking care of the fee, but Rockford just chooses not to? How long is our commitment?
It's not that they're not taking care of them. They've never done the agreement with ComEd to get the, see, this billing forgiveness that ComEd does, they could stop that program at any time. And I think that's what stopped, I'm guessing that's what stopped the city from taking this on. But to be honest, I blame it all on the IGAs. I have a folder when this originally started. I have all the IGAs and I've read them. Nowhere in there does it say who's responsible for the electricity. It talks about maintenance and installing and building the tower. So I can see why the communities thought they weren't responsible. But just so you know, Carla asked me to look into what the cost would be going forward once we get these 25 figured out. It's roughly between $20,000 and $21,000 a year for electricity for the sirens, for all the sirens that we pay. So that is the number that you have to focus on that it costs. But there's a lot of other expenses with sirens, like the batteries and everything else. But the electricity, it's around $20,000 to $21,000.
How long is our commitment in these IGAs to provide the sirens?
You know, I don't think there's an end date. I'd have to look at that. These go back many, many years.
Could you look at that to,
sure.
to see, you know,
Yeah.
so how long this current structure we're committed to? And then I think Ms. Gorel made a good point about new technology that might be available, solar, to, you know, look at different ways. Maybe, you know, I know Mr. McDonald and myself too, I think maybe we should consider trying to keep the sirens, especially in some parts of the county,
right.
But maybe not these sirens. I mean, how long has it been since this was installed, the system?
The bills I know go back to around 2008, 2009, but I I don't manage the sirens. I think that's more under IT function. I just deal with the billing.
Right.
So, and I kind of inherited this mess, so I've just, literally since I started, I've been working on this. This has been an ongoing project.
We might need to look at what new technology is available.
Yeah, that would be, IT would have to do that.
I see.
Yeah. But I'm sure they can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Pascal, then we'll go to Ms. Gorel.
The maintenance of the sirens runs about $140,000 a year. We're investigating other options for residents that don't have cell phones. We can consider distributing weather radios, and there's also plans with cell phone companies where they issue what's called a clam phone to residents that really will just work with weather alerts. It's not useful for phone calls, but they will do that at no charge. So those are options that we want to look into prior to presenting all the options to the committee and the board for which way they want to head.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Pascal. Thank you, Mr. Arena. Ms. Gorel?
Thank you. Is there anyone in this room, if you don't pay your electric bill, they cut it off? I can't believe the electric company let this go for so long and just build up all this money that we have to pay, and they haven't cut us off yet. There's something wrong someplace, because I know if I went even 3 months without paying my bill, I'd be cut off. And that's big time money. It's not a $100 bill. I just, I would actually hold the electric company for that too, because of the fact it's their fault for even letting it go this long. The city of Rockford I live in the city of Rockford. I like when I hear those things go off. It's usually because they're testing them. But on the other hand, that means all of us residents are the ones who are paying these big bills, and we aren't getting the benefit of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, we have a budget amendment in front of us, 2019-23, the ComEd siren past due invoices. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The budget amendment passes. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is Budget Amendment 2019-024, Memorial Hall Event Revenue and Expenditures to be laid over, but I'd like to suspend the rules as this was unanimous through committee.
All right, motion to suspend the rules. Do we have a second? Mr. Westcott, Mr. Boomer, Mr. Fellers. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, it is now in front of us. Mr. Salgado.
Yes, so I move to approve Budget Amendment 2019-024, Memorial Hall Event Revenue and Expenditures.
Motion's been made. We have a second by Mr. Westcott, Mr. Hoffman, and Mr. Boomer. Any discussion on the Memorial Hall event revenue expenditures? Is there any way we can have just a quick overview of what this consists of, Ms. Pascal, just so that we know?
When we had our budget meeting with Memorial Hall, we found that they have an event where they were recording the revenue and the expenditures in one account, so it would net to zero. And we would prefer that they record the revenue at gross and the expenditure at gross, so you can see the revenue generated from the event and the cost associated with that. So we needed to establish the expenditure budget and correspondingly the revenue budget.
Excellent, thank you. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. The budget amendment passes. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Zoning Committee, Mr. Webster. Thank you, Mr. Webster.
He is getting older.
Yeah.
Okay, excuse me, I just woke up. Zoning Committee has 5 items on our agenda this evening. The first 4, if it's no pushback on this, I'll take the first 4 altogether. Reason is they came with unanimous approval from both the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Zoning Committee. All 4 have some similarities. All 4 are special uses, so all 4 come with conditions. as amended at zoning committee. And so, and the other similarity there, I guess, would be that all 4 of these are business related as well, small businesses. And also the other similarity in them is none of them came and asked for host fees. So with that, I'll read for the record. Number 1 is SU 0519. Number 2 is SU 0619. Number 3, SU 0919. Number 4 is SU 1019. And I would, for the record, I'm reading it in, but I would move to approve.
So you make a motion to suspend the rules?
Yes. Motion
Okay, so a motion to suspend the rules is in front of us. Do we have a second? Ms. Corll, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Westcott. All those in favor of suspending the rules? Aye. Ms. Corll, Westcott, Kelly. All right, the rules have been suspended. All those opposed to suspending the rules? No? All right, the rules has been suspended. Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move to approve the 4 previously mentioned.
All right, so in front of us is the items 1 through 4.
Yes.
Any discussion on these items? None. All those in favor of approving these 4?
I'm sorry, did I get a second on that one?
For the motion to approve?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Did I make a motion? Did we make a motion?
You made the motion, but...
Made the motion, did I get a second?
Suspended?
Right.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then a motion for all 4. I think that's what she was looking for, Mr. Fellers. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers.
Okay, so the motion's in front of us, no discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, opposed? All right, the 4 passed. Mr. Webster.
Okay, thank you. The last thing I have is a resolution authorizing a waiver of fees for demolition permits. The zoning committee recommended approval unanimously on this one as well. This is something we've done in the past. If you want the Reader's Digest version, Chris Dornbush is there. He can probably give us the short synopsis of what this is about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This came through, this is a health department program, part of their attack against the blight to remove that. The host fees, $100,000 were granted to the health department. For the building department to waive fees that you guys have established, we have to come through to waive the fees with your permission. We're estimating it to be about $1,000 from the building division that we won't charge for the host fees, and the health department estimates it about $2,000 for some of their fees that to be waived for the site verifications to do this. This was done last year, and they're just continuing with this as the 2nd year of getting host fee funds to demolish homes that are on their list.
Okay.
We'll need a motion.
Thank you. With that, I move to approve.
Do we have a set? All right, Ms. Red, Ms. Okay. So we have the motion. We have. Okay. So we have that in front of us. We need a second for the motion. Mr. Neighbors, Mr. Village, and Mr. Westcott. The motion is in front of us. We had the explanation from Mr. Dornbush. Is there any discussion? Ms. Red. There we go.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have one question, maybe 2. How did you come up with a list of properties that shall be torn down?
I'm going to let Mr. Dornbush answer that. He worked with the health department hand in hand on this.
The health department have different types of programs based on the grant funds. So the host fees are a little bit wider spread, while some of the grants that they receive to reduce the blight are only for specific areas. The health department was talking about they have a kind of a grading system, and they regrade it, go through and check every about 6 months to see they have a certain criteria and scales on what comes up and how they grade it.
Are you able to share those criteria with us, with me?
I'm sure the health department would be happy to.
I'm a little disappointed. I'm looking at this list, and as you know, and all of the county board members know, my district is the most impoverished in the county. And I see some people with 4 houses that will be torn down, and I only have 3. I can't understand that. So who do I go to for an answer for that?
I would reach out to the health department, either Todd Marshall or Dr. Martell.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ms. Gorel.
Thank you. This is rated on the very worst right now, Dorothy. There's going to be another batch that'll be coming up, I think she said in August or for the fall. And so this is the beginning of this year, but we will have another big batch come up too. But they're rated as the condition and the endangerment to the community. In fact, that one on Freeport Road should have gone a long time ago. It's been a burnout, and we're finally getting to it. I wish that the health department could get to all the houses when they should, but they do have to go through, and they have a schedule, and they are ranking, and they rank them as they go from the very, very worst, and that's how it's done.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the resolution authorizing waiver of fees for demolition permits countywide, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion passes. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. All I have left is the next ZBA meeting is July 10th, and that'll follow up the zoning committee meeting July 24th. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next up, Economic Development, Chairman Westcott.
You go, man.
Thank you, Chairman. Before us tonight, I have a resolution appointing Jasmine Village as the chairman of the Economic Development Committee of the County Board of the County of Winnebago, Illinois, and I so move with pleasure.
Motion's in front of us. Second by Mr. Webster, Mr. Tassoni, Ms. Crosby, Mr. Boomer, Ms. Redd, Mr. Salgado. Did I miss anyone? All right. Any discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Resolution passes. Congratulations, Mr. Billich. And thank you, Mr. Westcott, for your years of service on this committee. You've done a great job, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Thank you. All right, moving right along. Operations Administration, Mr. Chairman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Operations Committee's got several resolutions for you this morning, or this afternoon, this evening, wherever we are. I'm under the weather, I apologize. The first resolution is awarding joint purchasing of carpentry services, and I so move.
All right, we have the motion on the floor, and we need a second. Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Arena, any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor of the resolution awarding joint purchasing carpentry services, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Resolution passes. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution authorizing the purchase of powered ambulance cots, and I so move.
And do we have a second? Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Petita, Mr. Arena, Mr. Salgado. Any discussion on the powered ambulance cots? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Resolution passes. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is a resolution awarding joint purchasing painting services, and I so move.
All right. Do we have a second? Mr. Arena. All right. Any discussion on the painting services? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is a resolution awarding joint seal coating services, and I so move.
All right. Do we have a second? Mr. Hoffman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Resolution passes. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution authorizing communication with the Illinois General Assembly regarding proposed changes to the property tax code for sales in error and tax deed.
All right. Motion's in front of us. Do we have a second? Mr. Arena, Mr. Salgado, Ms. Gorel. Any discussion on this resolution yet again?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to interject that this was discussed at committee. It was deemed by the committee and Mr. Kurlinkus to bring it back here for the vote. So no action was taken in committee. We referred it back to the full board.
Excellent. So this would make it official yet again, one more time. Any discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Resolution passes. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe, Carla, Monday we're looking at Operations Committee. Is that accurate?
That's true. Oh, Ms. Johns? Okay.
Carla says that's true for Monday.
For Monday.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Our coroner is very patiently waiting in the back of the room for the cots to be approved tonight, which you did approve. Unfortunately, the chairman's not here to sign it, and I have a question for our state's attorney. Is there any way the board can give approval for Carla to sign the agreement? Because the way it was voted on, it was to give the chairman the authority to sign the contract. Oh, basically a purchase order.
If it says, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you. If it says that the chairman needs to sign it, the chairman can sign it. The chairman has to sign it. Okay, and I know he's not here tonight, but he can sign it. He doesn't have to sign it during the meeting.
No, I know, but
Okay.
he's on vacation. We were just going to try to get it ordered this week if we could, so.
He has to sign it, that's what it says, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
May
All right,
I interject,
Mr.
Mr.
McDonald?
Chairman?
Yep, please.
Thank you very much. This is important to me. I spoke with Coroner Hines. I thought we already had powered cots. I was involved with helping move a deceased patient not too long ago, a very large person. I thought they already had powered cots, but they don't. This person, was almost 400 pounds. They also asked the fire department if we can come back and help unload that person. So I guess the point of my conversation is, even if the chairman doesn't sign it, does anybody have a problem with this, that if he sent it back, we would once again approve it? You know, is there a general consensus? Can I ask that question, that even if the chairman decides not to sign it, does everybody feel warm and fuzzy about getting the corner of these cots?
That already passed. The motion already passed, unless if the chairman within 10 days provides any information that he would like to challenge this, it would be passed, and the coroner would, once it's signed, be able to purchase those. Discussion from Ms. Crosby, then Mr. Fellers.
Is there any reason why we can't overnight this to him and have him overnight it back? I mean, is there some regulation that prohibits us from doing that? I mean, next day deliveries everywhere. Oh, but he'll tell us where he is. I'm sure if someone asks him, he's not going to say, I'm not going to tell you.
We'll find out.
You can certainly fax it to the chairman, you can email it to the chairman, you can send it back. I mean, in the world of electronics, people do that all the time. So the fact that he's not present personally doesn't mean that he can't sign it if he agrees with that, but he does have a 10-day veto power over what you passed.
State's Attorney Height. So what'd be my recommendation to staff is text him, ask him for an address, and do next day delivery. All right?
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Mr. Fellers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ross, would it be appropriate if, I'm familiar with the technology to help them step to do a digital signature, where he could just do a digital signing on a PDF form?
If the chairman authorizes a digital signature, he could certainly do that, but a digital signature is recognized.
Okay, and I can help you get set up if you need help with that.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Ms. Gorel?
If you've ever been on one of those gurneys, you know it takes 5 minutes to pick up just even a small person. I can't see a reason why you can't have those. Those are most important. If you like I say, if you haven't been on a gurney, you all need to be healthy and get on one and see what it's like, and then see how these guys have to pick you up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. Mr. Neighbors? Oh, I thought I saw your hand up there. All right. So hopefully we can get this to the chairman, get it signed right away, so Coroner Hintz can get these cots. So, Mr. McDonald?
It concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Mr. Tassoni, Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Public Works Committee brings forth 3 resolutions this evening. First item on the agenda is 19-017. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the Winnebago County and the Rockford Park District to provide joint maintenance and engineering services, and I would so move and also speak to it.
All right, second, Mr. Kelly, and discussion, Mr. Tassoni.
Yeah, just basically this is an agreement with the Rockford Park District. Any possible things that the Highway Department can perform, specifically engineering services, and what they might be able to offer us with either lawn, garden maintenance, turf, weed spraying, things of those nature. And we'll monitor that and make sure it's adequately equal trade.
Excellent. Any other discussion by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman. Next item on the agenda is 19-018. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of a membership agreement with Julie Inc. To notify Winnebago County Waterworks System for possible excavations. I so move and also would speak to it.
We need a second, please. Mr. Kelly. And the motion is in front of us. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just basically for anybody that wants to do possible excavations out in the area of our waterworks system out on Baxter and 39, that the agreement allows them to notify us of the need to mark that utility.
Excellent. The cost is $200. Can you elaborate on that cost?
Yeah, basically that's the current company that locates our traffic signals and things in the intersections. It's $200, I imagine, per visit to locate our water main out there, and basically it's maybe 8 to 12 calls a year that they may be performing excavation.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to put that out there. It says $200, but that is per call, so it's not $200 altogether. So we have the resolution in front of us. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman. Next item on the agenda is 19-019. It's a resolution approving an agreement between the County of Winnebago and Region 1 Planning Council to update Winnebago County's multi-hazard mitigation plan. I so move.
We need a second. Mr. Kelly, Mr. McDonald, any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Mr. Arena.
Just how many hours is this committing from Region 1?
I believe I've been heard 200 hours, upwards of 200 hours as far as some of their service. If you'd like some more specifics, I think Mr. Vanderwerf could speak to it and give us a little bit more detail if you'd like.
I was just curious how much of the service we get from them does this use up, was really all I was thinking.
I believe we're allocated 800 hours totally on an annual basis to the county, and this is roughly 200 for the mitigation study.
And Mr. Vanderwerf can kind of elaborate a little bit more on this. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They don't expect to go over 240 hours. It might be as low as 160. And we, as I understand it, are provided 800 hours of service annually. So this is no additional cost to the county by going forward with this.
Right, we've already paid for it.
I'm not sure I can say that, but you will be paying for it at some point in time when you make payments to R1PC.
Right, I believe we did make I thought we approved that earlier, right? $50,000 from our host fees was what we paid to Region 1, and that's for this, right?
I think that's an annual allocation.
Right, isn't that what that annual allocation pays for?
The annual allocation allows us up to 800 hours at R1 for them to do services such as this to the county.
Okay.
So
yeah.
That's our partnership with them.
Right, I just want to make sure I understood. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Any other discussion on the matter? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Tassoni.
Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the report.
Thank you. Next up, Public Safety Chairman Aaron Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. The Public Safety Committee has one item on the agenda, and it's a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement between the County of Winnebago and South Beloit Community School District number 320 for a school resource officer provided by the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. It passed Public Safety Committee, and I move for its adoption.
Excellent. Second by Mr. Fellers, Mr. Butita. Any discussion? Mr. Schultz.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask the county administrator, are we covering our costs, the dollar amount that's in this contract?
Are we covering our costs? We are with this IGA.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Schultz, any other questions? Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. I have one other item that's been brought to my attention for the past 2 months, and it has to do with, I'm guessing it has to do with people with their windows open now, and I'm getting complaints about vehicles with loud exhaust. Again, I have a feeling it has to do with people with their windows open, but my advice to them was always to contact their local law enforcement agency within that jurisdiction. But then I thought, well, I'll bring everybody up to speed on what the Illinois Vehicle Code actually says on it too. Of the Illinois Vehicle Code, section 12-602. Every motor vehicle driven or operated on the highway of this state shall at all times be equipped with an adequate muffler or exhaust system in constant operation and properly maintained to prevent any excessive or unusual noise. No such muffler or exhaust system shall be equipped with a cutout, bypass, or similar device. No person shall modify the exhaust system of a motor vehicle in a manner which will amplify or increase the noise of such vehicle above that emitted by the muffler originally installed by the manufacturer. That's going to upset some people. And such original muffler shall comply with all the requirements of this section. Again, it's welcome news to some and maybe a sore spot for others, but it's not one of those hazard or dangerous laws that we deal with. It's a quality of life issue. So again, a member of the Pecatonica Village Board, and I've had a couple of neighbors and people that run into me at the store, whether it's my law enforcement background or that I'm elected to the county board, but I'm getting questions on it. So I just thought I'd, in case anyone else is getting approached on it, that's the law, and it's very simple. And again, it's a quality of life issue. Again, bring it up to the local authorities of your proper jurisdiction. Lastly, on the tornado sirens, I am firmly opposed to removing any tornado sirens. There are those people that just will not carry a cell phone, and you got to think of the people that are driving down the road. You're not allowed to use your cell phone during the operation of a motor vehicle. I know this is kind of extreme, but we can also save money by taking the sirens out of police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances too. But again, it is the government's responsibility to provide public safety. That is our #1 priority. That wraps it up for a public safety report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Next up, Personnel Policies Committee, Chairman Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have one item tonight, and it's for a first reading, and that it's an ordinance creating sections of Chapter 2, Article 3, Division 7, Chief Human Resources Officer, the County Court of Ordinances, and this will be in for a first reading.
All right, so it is in for a first reading.
And we, of Animal Services, had 984 calls. I'd like to break them down. Cherry Valley had 6, New Milford had 0, the Village of Winnebago had 6, Pecatonica had 2, Durand had 1, South Beloit had 20, Roscoe had 9, Rockton had 16, Loves Park had 51, McChesney Park had 69, and unincorporated Winnebago County had 184. And that left a grand total of 620 calls for services in the city of Rockford. That made the grand total of 984 calls.
Of those 984 calls, the 620 were in the city of Rockford, which they haven't paid us for. We've intaked 176 dogs, 153 cats, 5 guinea pigs, 1 hamster, 1 snake, 1 lizard, 1 tarantula, 22 fish, and 50 wildlife, if you want to call it that. We've adopted out 65 dogs, 62 cats, 2 ferrets, 4 guinea pigs, 2 lizards, and 10 fish, and 2 domestic birdies. We still have 10 fish at Animal Services if anybody's interested, and I believe that tarantula and snake are there for Mr. Hoffman if he so wishes. And we're going to call it Joe. So that concludes our report. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Fiducia. Ms. Ponder would like to speak.
I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, hold on, we got to get a microphone over to you real quick.
There you go.
It's on now.
Did I hear?
Oh, I just didn't hold it long enough. I'm sorry. Is it on now?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to, I know that this is in for a first reading on the CHRO position, but I do want to make sure in a committee meeting earlier, the question was asked of me about filling that position. And at the time I asked, basically said that I did not want to speak to it. I didn't think it was appropriate. But what I do want to do is let you all know, each and every one of you, that I would always be happy to speak to you individually. I would be happy to do a presentation to the board regarding my credentials and my recent SHRM senior level certification that I earned. I would be happy to review that and answer any questions anybody had about my credentials. I'd like to also offer you the opportunity to review a job description. I was not afforded that opportunity to look at the job description before the board packet was distributed. I would be happy to have a discussion with any of you regarding the job description and any of the duties that are already listed in that description that are already in the director's position that I currently hold. So those would be duplicates of responsibilities. And I'd be happy to provide a compensation review. I know the question came up as to what a position like that would pay. Part of the responsibilities in my department is we do compensation studies. 3 of my staff are Hayes certified to be able to do that, and I am one of those individuals. And I would be happy to provide that recap for the board on what a position like this would have at a compensation level. So I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ponder. Chairman Fiducia, anything else? All right, thank you.
No, my report's concluded.
Thank you, Chairman Fiducia. Next up, the Liquor Commission. I'll be filling in for Mr. Haney. This will be in for a first reading, and it's ordinance amending Section 6-13 of the Winnebago County Code to expand the hours during which county liquor licensees may sell alcohol liquor on Sundays. And that would move it up to 6 a.m. And I'm not sure what it was. So that'll be in for the first reading. Mr. Tassoni, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as serving on the Liquor Commission, Mr. Westcott and I, basically this just takes at least there's various licenses you can purchase depending on your tent. It takes a couple of different licenses and moves one from an 8 a.m. serving to 6 a.m. and one from 11 a.m. to 6 a.m. And that's on Sundays. And basically what this does is bring us right in line with other surrounding communities. And without any objection, I would move to suspend the rules so we could vote on it tonight.
Motion to suspend's been made, seconded by Mr. Butita, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Kelly. Any discussion on suspending the rules? Mr. Arena?
Is it necessary to suspend the rules on this? I think, I just wanted...
I believe it's ordinance in for the first reading, so it would have to be...
No, I mean, is there any urgency in passing this?
Mr. Tassoni?
No, I don't see no urgency. That's why I asked without any objection. But
yeah, I guess I would just like to understand it better
It's, I can,
Who requested it is my thing.
the,
Mr. Butita, can you speak to that?
Yes. I had a constituent who has 2 county liquor licenses in my district who made a request to me for expanded Sunday hours. He also owns a liquor license in Loves Park. And apparently there is revenue to be made on Sunday mornings. I guess not everybody's at church. So there's an opportunity for additional income. And this would put us, our hours in line with Rockford, Loves Park, and McChesney Park. So I brought it forward to the Liquor Commission, and that's why it's before us now.
Mr. Arena, follow-up?
And there was no objection, nobody?
It was unanimously approved at the Liquor Commission, yes.
From the public, was the public aware that this was happening and people had the opportunity to speak up?
I don't think it has to be public.
all of our scheduled committee meetings and commissions are all publicly announced. Anybody, it's open to the public.
And no one came forward in opposition?
No.
Okay, then I'm fine.
Okay, so the motion's been made to suspend the rules on this. Any other discussion on suspending the rules? Seeing none, all in favor of suspending the rules, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Rules have been suspended. It's now in front of you. Is there, so we have the motion now to approve the ordinance amending section 613 of the Winnebago County Code to expand the hours during which county liquor licensees may sell alcohol liquor on Sundays. Any discussion on that? Oh, I need a motion, then I need a second. Motion by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Tassoni and Mr. Westcott. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. That concludes the Liquor Commission report. Any unfinished business? Seeing none. Any new business? There is one. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the Republican caucus, I believe it was talked about committee chairs. Do we really need to stand before everyone and give a report? Can we do it from our seats? Maybe we could discuss it next caucuses and find out. I personally don't have a problem just doing it from our seats. We're not any more important that we need to be up front. So if we could talk about it, maybe we can make a decision next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I believe there's nothing in our ordinance that states that we have to come up to the podium. So, all right. If everyone's great with that, we'll discuss that. The next matter for new business is the appointment of the City of Rockford Alderman Tuffy Quinez to the Winnebago County Board of Health, and that'll be in for a first reading. Ms. Gorel? Motion to suspend the rules?
Excuse me, yes, let's suspend the rules and get this done. Every time we ask someone from the city to be on the Winnebago County Board of Health, they come to 3 meetings and then they don't, and we don't ever see them. I mean, we must be awful. But anyway, it interferes many times with what the city has to do. So I would suggest that we go ahead and suspend the rules. Let's get Tuffy Quinones acclimated to it and see how long we can keep him.
Excellent. Motion's been made to suspend the rules. Do I have a second? Mr. Westcott. Rules has been suspended. All those in favor of appointing Mr. Tuffy to the Winnebago County Board? Suspending the rules? I'm sorry. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Now it's in front of us. All those in favor?
No, you need a motion.
Now I need a motion to appoint by Mr. Westcott, seconded by Mr. Neighbors. Any discussion on the appointment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Mr. Tuffy has been appointed. Perfect. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. No, we have one more. Mr. Tassoni.
Oh, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say, as acting chairman this evening, I'd like to commend you and say you did an exceptional job.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. With that, a motion to adjourn, please, by Mr. Butita, seconded by Mr. Billich, Mr. Neighbors. Thank you.
You did do an excellent job.
Hey, I tried. Thank you, sir.